Hello guys, Matthew here and welcome back again to my channel. ASUS and Scythe decided to team up within the ASUS so-called TUF gaming alliance, TUF standing for the Ultimate Force, where they've rounded up a few famous brands in one place, besides Scythe brands like Cooler Master, Inwin, G-Skill, Entech, Silverstone, Corsair, Deepcool, 8ada and others, where each of them offer a couple of their popular products within the aforementioned TUF Gaming Alliance portfolio, so users will get that well-known TUF reliability and performance stamp of approval, while also getting the possibility to color match their own build based on that recognizable TUF series signature look. This time I actually have two of such products coming from Scythe, of course those being CPU coolers. I apologize in advance if I'm going to butcher their names, the Kotetsu Mark II and Choten, both of them being TUF branded. Right away you can notice that the product packaging is a lot different than what we are used to seeing from Scythe, which is to be expected taking everything into consider. It's all pretty much blacked out, just with some subtle silhouettes of the actual product, and with a lot of TUF yellow and brownish copperish accents, TUF and ASUS logo on it, or a sync support with of course RGB support. You just cannot build a PC without having RGB light, it wouldn't work, and that's a fact. Taking a look inside, whoever decided to put this little flap for pulling the box latch, please give that man a raise, it's so much easier to open up the box with it. Anyway, back to it. The layout in both product boxes is pretty simple. You'll get an accessory box with the necessary parts for the installation, and the cooler itself with the attached fan in case of Choten, and the attached with Kotetsu. Right away you can notice that these models are different in their shape. The Kotetsu is a classic example of a bit beefier single tower CPU cooler, while the Choten comes in this sort of low profile top-down cooler design, although it's not actually that much lower than the Kotetsu, around 3 cm. In terms of the build and cooling configuration, the Choten has a 4 nickel-plated copper heat pipe setup, which are running through the aluminum fin array from one side to another. The Kotetsu also has a total of 4 heat pipes, stretching from one half of the heatsink's fin array through the other half, while passing through the CPU base plate. Speaking of it, both have a nickel-plated copper CPU base plate with a very polished surface finish, almost completely mirror-like. Both of them have a more premium build feel compared to their original counterparts, which comes in as a credit of now having these TUF-like details and finish. Of course, to top everything off, each cooler comes with a single 120mm RGB fan, which have these white translucent blades, and I'll talk about their lighting effect a little bit later on. We also have yellow anti-vibration rubber pads in each corner, 4-pin PWM fan header and an RGB header with a split connection for daisy chaining. As for the mounting options, Choten in this TUF Gaming Alliance version doesn't use the push-in pins like its original, but now it rather comes in with a much wider socket support. As you can see it here, it basically supports every possible socket except the TR4, and the same goes for the Kotetsu since it uses the same mounting system. The installation process was really simple as it can be in this case, a 5-minute job at most. You already have pre-placed screws on the enclosed backplate, so you just need to put the spacers and holding brackets on two sides, put the cooler with the pressure crossbar onto the CPU, tighten everything in, and that's basically it. As simple as that in terms of Intel's 11.5X socket installation. RAM clearance is good in both cases, but have in mind that Choten overhangs the RAM slots, so be sure to buy RAM that's up to 55mm tall. The same can be said for the clearance of the first PCI Express slot on the motherboard. Everything checks out in both coolers. If you for some reason plan to put them into their, so to speak, unnatural orientation, with Choten you won't be able to use the first PCI Express slot, while with Kotetsu you'll limit yourself out of a taller RAM module support. Okay, now that everything is mounted, let's put some heat onto these coolers. First up is the Kotetsu Mark II. Using AIDA 64 system stability test to properly load the CPU, my Core i7-6700K running at stock settings was barely reaching 65 degrees Celsius per core on average, with the package temperature mostly being below 70 degrees Celsius. Bumping up the core voltage to 1.31 volts in BIOS and overclocking the CPU to 4.6 GHz on all cores, I was seeing around 10 degrees Celsius increase on the core and package maximal temperature, while the average was mostly between 65 to 75 degrees Celsius, which is really good. It's especially good if you consider that the fan was pretty quiet at stock load, and that's under normal fan setting preset in motherboard's BIOS, which actually has a pretty aggressive default fan curve running at just below 1200 RPM. In idle you cannot even hear it, it runs at around 850 to 900 RPM, while the core temperatures are just a degree or two higher than the ambient one. Jumping over to Choten and putting it through the same run, it ended up having basically the same performance output at stock load, just a degree or two higher than its single tower brother, as you can see it here. But it didn't manage to cope with the same overclocking settings under load, as it ran up to around 85 degrees Celsius pretty fast, and after a while the test would just stop. That's not odd since it has overall less surface and volume for heat dissipation, so it cannot cope with the same TDP. After that, I've dropped the voltage to 1.265 volts, dialed the clock down to 4.5 GHz, and with doing that I got very good temperature figures on the load, just a tad higher than the stock load scenario. Idle performance is basically the same compared to the Kotetsu, a degree or two above the ambient temperature, as well as the acoustic performance, as both of their fans top out at around 1200-1250 RPM in CPU load scenarios with overclocking settings, which is basically the fan's nominal highest speed. Choten is a bit louder though, possibly due to different heatsink constitution and orientation, so it probably experiences more turbulence, which can translate into more noise. Lastly, I took a closer look at that 120mm RGB fan, which now comes in as a part of the TUF Gaming Alliance package. As you saw, performance-wise, I really had no complaints about it, while I can also say that for the RGB lighting portion. It lights up evenly, there's no apparent color spill, you can just slightly notice a couple of LEDs emitting behind the hub, but nothing too obvious. As I said before, it supports ASUS Aura Sync feature, but I found it to work without a problem on Gigabyte's Aorus motherboard with their RGB Fusion utility, and that's not a surprise since this technology and its protocol is pretty much standardized across the field. I had no problem syncing it up with my motherboard, and you can control the fan together as a group or separately. Scythe once again delivered two well-rounded CPU coolers, but this time with an added kick to their overall design, courtesy of being a part of TUF Gaming Alliance portfolio, which got them a more fuller visual identity. This is something that they usually do not have with their products. Scythe is pretty straightforward in terms of the aesthetics of their coolers, which is why they can offer them more as a value-oriented Best Buy type of products, while these two now have a price premium of around $10 extra compared to their original models on which they're based off. Thankfully, it's still up to you to choose between them. You can decide if that extra blink, color scheme and RGB lighting is worth that additional money, or would you just rather stick to Scythe's very well established price to performance ratio of the original models. That's it for this time from me. Thank you once again for watching. Toss me a thumbs up if you enjoyed my content, that really helps me a lot. And if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe. And if you already are, be sure to press that notification bell down below so you don't miss out on a new video. And until then, catch you later guys.